Before we begin, let me ask you something. Have you ever loved someone not because you were meant to, but because somehow they felt like coming home? If stories about quiet strength, unexpected love, and the kind of healing that takes time speak to your heart, go ahead and like this video and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss the next chapter. Now, settle in. This story starts with silence, but it won't end there. The chandelier above me sparkled like frozen stars, beautiful, distant, and completely incapable of warmth. Beneath its light, I stood in a white silk dress that wasn't mine, in a house that didn't feel like a place, where anyone loved anyone. Nathaniel Black didn't look at me when we exchanged vows. His hand was warm, though. I noticed that. He held mine for the bare minimum time the ceremony required, his grip firm but impersonal, like a signature on a contract. In some ways, it was exactly that. No music played. No one clapped. Just silence, and the quiet shifting of tailored shoes on polished wood floors. My name is Evelyn Harper. I'm 24 years old. I used to run a small sewing shop in a Vermont town with more deer than people. I used to think that love would look like something soft, something slow, something warm. Instead, it came wrapped in obligation, handed over by my uncle across a mahogany desk with the words, "This is the only way to save your father's land." Nathaniel Black was the only man willing to pay off the debt that hung over our family farm like a winter sky. In return, he asked for one thing: marriage. Not love, not affection, just marriage. He didn't want a wife. He wanted resolution, image, control. And yet here I was, stepping into a role I never auditioned for, watching a man in a charcoal gray suit, who hadn't so much as smiled once, sign my future with a Mont Blanc pen. The ceremony lasted 17 minutes. When it ended, I walked past polished stone statues and floor-length mirrors that reflected a version of me I barely recognized. The silk gown itched. The pearl earrings felt heavy. My throat ached with words I didn't know how to say. In my room, guest suite, they called it, I sat on the edge of the bed, fingers clutched around a small silver ring I wore on a chain under my dress. My mother's ring, worn thin, smooth from years of bread making and dishwashing. She used to hum while she worked in the kitchen, steam rising around her as she steeped tea. Real love, she once told me as she peeled apples for a pie, never comes loud. It comes in like steam, like the way warm light feels on winter skin. She wasn't here to see me marry. Cancer had taken her too early. My father, now nearly immobile from his accident last spring, hadn't even known I was getting married today. I hadn't told him. I couldn't bear to see the confusion in his eyes, how it would fade to resignation. I stood up and unzipped my bag, fingers trembling not from fear, but from exhaustion. I wanted to lie down, forget the glint of Nathaniel's cufflinks, the sterile silence of our vows, the way my name sounded like a contract when he said it. Then I saw it, tucked between the lining of my suitcase and the satin of my backup dress. A yellowing envelope, faded, folded in half. My name written on the front in the looping, delicate handwriting that still lived in my dreams. Evelyn, if this ever finds you on your wedding day. My breath caught. My knees buckled. I sat again, unfolding the letter like it was something sacred, something alive. My darling girl, if you are reading this, then I have already failed to stop something I prayed wouldn't happen. There are names in this world that carry more than power. They carry old wounds, old debts. If the man you are marrying has the name Blackwell, I need you to know something. He is not a stranger to me. Nor is this marriage as accidental as it seems. My skin prickled. Nathaniel Black. That was the name I knew. But years ago, I'd heard whispers, articles in glossy magazines with the byline Nathaniel Blackwell before he rebranded. A name heavy with corporate history. But why would my mother know it? Before I met your father, Evelyn, there was another man. And once, I nearly married him. His name was Thomas Blackwell. I loved him. But I walked away. I made a choice. And I never spoke of it again. If his son is the man you've married, then perhaps this is life's strange way of closing a loop I left open. The letter ended with something that didn't feel like closure, but confession. I never told you because I wanted to protect you from my regrets. But you deserve to know the truth. Because if you ever feel that same quiet pull, that warmth in the cold, perhaps it is not all a mistake after all. I pressed the paper to my chest. In the hallway, footsteps passed. Likely Nathaniel, going to his study, or to nowhere, really. He didn't seem like a man who needed places, just purpose. I didn't know what to think of him. Only that when he stood beside me at the altar, I hadn't felt anger, or even fear. I'd felt something else. Emptiness. And now, something else entirely. If this was a story about revenge between generations, if my mother had once loved his father, then what did that make us? A correction? A punishment? Or maybe, just maybe, something. Neither of us could yet name. The house was quiet in the way only great wealth could afford. Too quiet. Not the comforting hush of a peaceful home, but a kind of sterile silence, like a museum where the past was preserved and the present wasn't welcome. Nathaniel Black and I had been married for 6 days. We hadn't spoken more than 6 sentences. He took his coffee alone each morning in the glass solarium, suit pressed, tie perfect, eyes hidden behind his tablet. He left by 7 a.m. and returned well after dark. I hadn't asked where he went. He hadn't told me. The staff didn't speak much either, though the housekeeper, Janine, once left a folded blanket at the foot of my bed with a note. For the chill that doesn't come from the cold. I missed the creak of floorboards in my father's old farmhouse. I missed the sound of my mother humming in the kitchen while water boiled for tea. I missed the smell of fabric and thread, the weight of simple things. Here, everything was too light, too expensive, too polished. Still, every evening I made tea in the small kitchen off the east wing. The main kitchen was too industrial, too full of stainless steel, and people who looked like they were afraid of me, or for me. But the east kitchen was older, probably used by staff long ago. It smelled faintly of cinnamon and something forgotten. I made chamomile tea with a touch of clove, just like Mom used to, and called the care facility in Brattleboro where she now lived. She couldn't speak much anymore, but I spoke for both, of us. I told her about the weather, about the roses blooming out back. I told her I missed her. One night, as I finished the last of my tea, I heard a door open behind me. I turned, expecting Janine, or maybe no one at all. It was Nathaniel. He wasn't in a suit, just a soft navy sweater and slacks. Barefoot. His hair was slightly tousled, like he'd run a hand through it 1,000 times and never settled it back in place. I stood still. He looked at me as though surprised I occupied the same house. Couldn't sleep? I asked before I could stop myself. His gaze flickered. Didn't try. He walked past me to the counter, poured himself a glass of water. The silence returned, but it was different this time. Less sterile, more tentative. You always make tea at night? He asked. Yes, I said, after a pause. It helps me remember who I was before I came here. That made him look at me directly. Not like a contract, like a person. I'm not sure I ever knew who I was before this house, he murmured. I blinked. The comment struck me like an echo in an empty room. Unexpected. Real. I reached for another teacup. Would you like some? He hesitated, then nodded. I poured carefully, the steam curling up between us like a bridge too fragile to walk across. He held the cup with both hands. Didn't sip, just held it. My mother used to make this, I said quietly. Chamomile and clove. She said it kept the sadness out. He didn't respond, but I saw something shift in his shoulders. We sat in silence. Not awkward, just quiet. Then he said, Your mother's care facility, Harmony Glen? I turned toward him, surprised. Yes. He sipped his tea. I arranged for the transfer last week. They weren't going to take her without a private suite. I sent a donation. Quietly. I stared. You. I couldn't finish the sentence. He didn't look up. She deserves dignity. I set my cup down. My hands were trembling. Why would you do that? His jaw tightened. Then very softly he said, Because I remember what it's like to watch someone you love fade. My mother had early onset dementia. She died when I was 15. I hadn't known. No article ever mentioned that. I'm sorry, I whispered. He nodded once. So am I. I wanted to say more, ask more. But something in the air told me not to push. Instead, I reached into the pocket of my robe and took out a small tin of dried orange peels, my mother's final touch in tea. I added a few to his cup. He looked at me puzzled. It's how she ended the day, I said. She believed citrus reminded the heart to keep going. He didn't smile, but his eyes changed, like frost thawing, one flake at a time. Later that night, back in my room, I couldn't sleep either. I held the letter from my mother, folded it gently, and slid it into the back of the photo frame on my nightstand. The one with her holding me as a baby, both of us laughing. I wasn't sure what my mother had truly meant when she wrote, This may not be an accident. I didn't know what Nathaniel had known about our past, if anything. But I knew one thing now. The man I married wasn't made entirely of steel. He had buried a mother, carried a weight, and for the first time, I wondered if perhaps the silence between us wasn't cruelty. Perhaps it was grief. It was a rainy Thursday, the kind that soaked your socks even under an umbrella. I stood outside Harmony Glen, clutching a brown paper bag of cinnamon muffins. My mother liked them soft, slightly warm. It made her smile. Today, though, her face looked more distant than usual. Her eyes unfocused, searching for memories behind the misty glass of her mind. Still, she smiled when I walked in. Evelyn, she said faintly. Your hair's longer. Pretty. I hadn't changed my hair. I sat beside her on the window bench, the same spot we always shared, and let her lean against my shoulder. Rain tapped softly on the glass. I pulled out the muffins and handed her one. She held it carefully as if it were something more fragile than food. Mama, I said after a long pause. Do you remember the name Blackwell? Her fingers stilled. For a moment, her eyes cleared. Just a flicker, like sunlight through cloud. Yes, she said, then closed her eyes. Thomas? I hadn't expected her to say it aloud. You knew him, I said. She gave a slow nod. We were engaged once, she murmured. Before your father, I was young, foolish. He was the kind of man people talked about. Tall, ambitious, full of plans. His father didn't approve of me. I was just a nurse's daughter from Montpellier. Her fingers trembled around the muffin. He broke it off? I asked gently. She shook her head. No, I did. I left. I met your father 2 weeks later. He had kindness, Evelyn. The kind that doesn't ask for anything back. I felt my stomach knot. But you loved Thomas. A tear slipped down her cheek, thin as thread. I did. But I trusted your father. I didn't know what to say. We sat in silence for a long time. When the nurse came in to take her for her nap, she squeezed my hand and whispered, "Don't be afraid to love someone just because the story started wrong." I drove back in silence. Windshield wipers beat out a rhythm that felt like the ticking of a clock running out of time. At home, our home, if I could even call it that, I found Nathaniel in his study, standing by the fireplace. The rain had followed, me in, trailing drops down my coat and into my shoes. I didn't care. "I need to ask you something," I said, voice tight. He looked up. "All right." I walked forward and handed him the letter from my mother, the one I'd found on my wedding night. He read it. Carefully, quietly. Then he folded it and handed it back to me without a word. "Did you know?" I asked. His jaw tightened. "Not when I agreed to the arrangement. I only recognized your mother's name the night after we married." "And you said nothing?" What could I say? I felt something boil in my chest. Not anger. Something more fragile. Betrayal's quieter cousin. Disappointment. "She loved your father once," I said. He stared at the fire. "Yes." "She left him for mine." A muscle in his cheek twitched. He never got over it. Silence fell between us like a dropped plate. Sharp, shattering, impossible to ignore. "My father built Blackwell Holdings from the ground up," he said finally. He expected me to continue it. Cold, focused, ruthless. When I asked him, years ago, about why he was so hard, he told me there was a woman once who made him soft, and he'd never forgive himself for it. I swallowed. And that woman was my mother. Nathaniel nodded once. "And now you've married me," I whispered, "the daughter of that same woman." He looked at me then, truly looked at me. "It wasn't revenge, Evelyn." "Then what was it?" "I don't know," he admitted. "At first, maybe it was just an answer to a question I never dared to ask. And now?" He took a breath. Slow. Uneven. "Now you confuse me." My lips parted in surprise. "You remind me of everything I've spent years trying not to want," he continued. "Kindness. Simplicity. A home that smells like tea and muffins and wet socks by the fire." I laughed before I could help it. "That's a terrible metaphor." He smiled, barely, but it was real. "You don't owe me anything, Evelyn," he said softly. "Not love, not time, not forgiveness." "Then why did you help my mother? Why protect the land?" "Because I couldn't help my own mother," he whispered. "And because your mother once made my father human. I thought maybe, just maybe, you could do the same for me." For a moment, I couldn't breathe. I had come here to accuse, to demand, to question. But all I saw now was a man trying to undo a legacy he never asked for. He turned back to the fire. I stepped forward, slowly, close enough that I could feel the warmth of the flames bouncing off the back of his sweater. I reached out and, without thinking, touched his shoulder. He didn't flinch. He just stood there, still, quiet. And for the first time since our wedding, I felt something other than emptiness between us. I felt the beginning of truth. The next morning, I found Nathaniel in the small kitchen. Not the main kitchen with its polished chrome and granite counters. No, the East Wing kitchen. The one that, smelled of old cinnamon and fading time. He was standing at the stove, sleeves rolled up, staring into a pot of water just beginning to steam. A small tin of dried chamomile flowers sat beside him, along with orange peel and a cinnamon stick. He didn't look up when I entered. I wasn't sure how much clove to use, he said, voice low. I blinked, unsure how to respond. He wasn't asking for help. He was offering something. I stepped forward slowly. Half a pinch, I said, gently taking the jar from his hand. Too much. And it turns bitter. He nodded. Stepped back. We stood side by side in the gentle hush of morning, the only sound the soft whistle of the kettle and the rain beginning again outside the windows. It was peaceful, unfamiliar, but not uncomfortable. When the tea was done, we sat at the small wooden table. No marble, no gold-rimmed china, just two people holding warm cups between. Chilled fingers, Nathaniel looked tired. Not in the way of someone who didn't sleep, but like someone who'd carried too much for too long. I spoke to my mother yesterday, I said. He looked at me over the rim of his cup. Did she remember? I nodded. More than I expected. He didn't ask what she said. I was grateful for that. Instead, he said, "My father died bitter. He never forgave her for choosing someone else. He used it like fuel. Built everything he could so he'd never have to feel that kind of rejection. Again. And you?" Nathaniel stirred his tea slowly. I built to survive, not to feel. I didn't respond. Some truths didn't need follow-up. Outside, the rain deepened. We sat like that for a long while, letting it wrap around the windows like a blanket. The quiet wasn't uncomfortable anymore. It felt earned. Then he said something I didn't expect. "I turned down the Harrington deal last week." I blinked. "That was worth millions." 24, he said quietly. "But it would have leveled the orchard your father planted behind the house." I stared at him. "I didn't do it for leverage," he added. "I didn't even tell anyone. I just couldn't bear to take away something someone else loved." The words caught somewhere in my throat. "That orchard," I whispered, "was where he taught me to whistle." Nathaniel's gaze lifted. "Can you still?" I smiled, just a little. "Only when I'm nervous." He chuckled softly, and it felt like finding a hidden room in a house you'd lived in for months. Just then, the doorbell rang. Nathaniel stood, set down his cup, and walked to answer. A few muffled voices, then footsteps returning. "I hope you don't mind," he said, re-entering the room with a figure behind him. I stood. My heart caught. "Uncle Pete?" My father's younger brother, rugged and sun-beaten, stepped forward and pulled me into a hug that smelled like hay and motor oil. "I came as soon as I heard," he said gruffly. "You heard?" I looked at Nathaniel, confused. He nodded. "I called him." "Why?" I asked. Nathaniel hesitated, then answered simply, "Because you shouldn't be carrying all this alone." I couldn't speak. My eyes burned. We spent the afternoon together. Me, Nathaniel, and Uncle Pete. We sat in the small kitchen, ate slices of apple bread I'd baked and frozen last week. It was a strange but beautiful thing. Family, or the beginning of it, seated around an old table with mismatched mugs and a shared silence that didn't ache anymore. Before Uncle Pete left, he took me aside. "He's not like I imagined," he said, nodding toward Nathaniel. "I thought he'd be colder, sharper." "He was," I said, "but he's changing." Pete smiled. "So are you." That night, I couldn't sleep. Not because I was restless, but because I was full. Full of memories. Full of moments that no longer hurt the way they used to, I went to the library, Nathaniel's favorite room, and found him sitting in an armchair, reading. The fire had burned low, casting flickering shadows across his face. I sat across from him. "You didn't have to call Pete." "I know," he said, "but I wanted to." I tucked my feet beneath me. "You're starting to make this place feel like home." He set down the book. "That's all I've ever wanted, Evelyn." I looked at him. "I don't know what this is between us yet," I said honestly, "but it's becoming something I trust." He smiled faintly. "Then let me earn the rest." And in that room, under the amber light of an old lamp and the steady crackle of fire, we didn't need to touch, to feel close. It was enough. The letter arrived on a Tuesday. A cream-colored envelope, thick and elegant, with my name written in looping script. Tucked between advertisements and utility bills, it felt like something out of another life. Or maybe a different version of this one. I opened it slowly, fingertips brushing the edge like it might vanish. "Evelyn Harper, we're pleased to inform you that your application to the Florence Fellowship in Textile Arts has been accepted. I didn't remember applying." Then I saw the second page, stapled beneath the letter, a submission titled, "The Quiet Thread, Domestic Textiles and Memory." By Evelyn Harper, nominated by L. McGregor. Mrs. McGregor, my college mentor. She must have submitted my senior project without telling me. And I'd been accepted. 6 weeks in Florence. All expenses paid. Private instruction. An opportunity people waited years for. I sat down. The kitchen was quiet except for the gentle hum of the old refrigerator and the tick of the wall clock I'd come to love. Outside, the orchard swayed in the wind, heavy with the memory of my father's laughter and the ghost of his footsteps teaching me to whistle between trees. I folded the letter and placed it under my teacup. Then I went to find Nathaniel. He was on the back patio, trimming an herb planter, his version of a break, though he still wore his cufflinks and leather shoes. He looked up when I stepped outside. "I got something," I said. He wiped his hands with a cloth and motioned for me to join him. "Good or bad?" "I'm not sure yet." I handed him the letter. He read it slowly. When he finished, he looked at me, his expression unreadable. "It's a remarkable offer," he said, softly. I waited for him to say more. He didn't. "You're not going to stop me?" I asked. "Why would I?" I stepped closer. "Because we're married." He held my gaze. "You didn't marry me to be caged, and I didn't marry you to trap you." His words were simple, honest. "I didn't ask for this," I said quietly. "Any of it," he nodded. "I know." We stood in silence. Finally, I said, "I think I need to go, not to escape, just to breathe." "I think you do too," he said. "And I'll be here when you come back." His voice didn't waver, but something in his eyes did. A flicker, a fracture. Later that evening, I sat in my room, packing a small suitcase. Just the essentials, notebooks, a few worn cardigans, and the ring my mother had left me. I tucked it into the side pocket, near my passport. There was a soft knock on the door. Nathaniel entered, holding a small box wrapped in faded blue paper. "This was in my father's safe," he said. "I wasn't going to give it to you, but now it feels right." I opened it carefully. Inside was a letter, aged and yellowed, with a familiar signature. Thomas Blackwell. It was addressed to my mother. I held my breath and read, "Grace, if I've learned anything in this life, it's that pride means nothing when you've already lost the one person who made you soft. I hope you find peace. I hope your daughter grows up strong and kind, like you. And if she ever meets my son..." Tell her not to punish him for the mistakes I never had the courage to undo. Till my hands trembled. He never sent it, Nathaniel said. But he kept it, all these years. I folded the letter carefully and held it to my chest. I'm not running away, I whispered. I know. I looked up. But I do need space to become someone I recognize again. He nodded. I reached for his hand. His fingers wrapped around mine. Not possessive, not pleading. Just steady. I'll write, I said. He smiled, just barely. I'll wait. 3 weeks later, Florence was a blur of stone streets and morning bells. I drank espresso, studied tapestries older than America, and remembered how to breathe on my own. I watched the sunset alone, but not lonely. I missed him. Quietly. Steadily. And then, one evening, I opened my notebook to find a page I hadn't written. The handwriting was his. Evelyn, I'm not asking you to come back. I'm asking you to come home, when you're ready. Not before. And if you don't, thank you for reminding me what it means to feel human. Nye traced the letters with my finger, tears welling and then softening. He hadn't asked for anything, just waited. And in that moment, I knew. Love wasn't always about holding on. Sometimes, it was about standing still long enough for someone to come back by choice. I returned home in the quiet hour before dusk. The sky was painted in lavender and rust, and the fields near the Blackwell estate glowed like faded gold beneath the October light. The gravel crunched under the wheels of my taxi, a sound that felt oddly comforting. I stepped out with one small suitcase and a heart heavier than I'd expected. Not heavy with regret, but with a kind of stillness. The kind you only earn after walking away and finding your way back. Janine opened the door before I could ring the bell. She smiled the way one does when watching a long story finally find its pause. He's in the east kitchen, she said quietly, as if the walls could still hear. I walked down the long hallway, past the sitting room, the library, and the staircase. I once felt too timid to climb. Everything looked the same, but it didn't feel the same. It felt like a place I could choose. The light in the east kitchen was low and golden. Nathaniel stood by the stove, sleeves rolled up, stirring something in a small pot. The air smelled of honey and cinnamon. He turned when he heard my steps, and for a moment, just one, he froze. Then he smiled. Not the polite kind I'd seen at meetings or dinners, not the careful, curated version of himself. It was a quiet smile. Honest, relieved. Welcome home, he said. My throat tightened. I hadn't realized how much I needed to hear those words. Not as an obligation, but as an offering. I wasn't sure if you'd still be making tea, I said. I never stopped, he replied. But I missed the orange peel. I always get the balance wrong. I stepped forward and gently took the jar from the counter. Just 2 pieces. Any more, and it overpowers the chamomile. He nodded. We didn't speak for a while after that. We just stood there, side by side, moving in an old rhythm we'd only started to learn before I left. I poured the tea. He added a touch of honey. We sat at the kitchen table like we had in Chapter 2 of whatever this story was becoming. I read your note, I said softly. I meant it, he replied. I know. Outside, the wind rustled the leaves. Autumn had taken hold, and the orchard beyond the windows was a watercolor of fading red and amber. Something came while you were gone, he said, reaching into the drawer beside him. I almost threw it out, thinking it was junk mail. He handed me a small envelope, yellowed, sealed with wax, and addressed in a shaky hand. To Grace Harper, care of the Blackwell family estate. My heart skipped. It's from the lawyer who handled my father's estate, Nathaniel said. Apparently this letter had been misplaced for years. They found it in an old box. I opened it carefully. Inside was a single sheet, handwritten in the unmistakable curves of Thomas Blackwell, Nathaniel's father. Grace, if you ever see this, know that I never hated you. I hated what I let pride do to me. I see the boy Nathaniel has become so like you, so careful with his silence, so guarded with his love. If your daughter ever ends up with him, tell her not to be afraid. There's a good man under all that armor, but he needs someone to believe that before he can believe it himself, with what remains of my heart. Thomas, I looked up at Nathaniel. He was watching me carefully, eyes clouded with something he rarely allowed to show. Vulnerability. He kept this, I asked. Nathaniel nodded. It was sealed in a small box marked, "If ever." I folded the letter and placed it beside my cup. Did he ever tell you he was proud of you? I asked. Nathaniel's voice was quiet. No, but I think he wanted to. He just didn't know how. I reached for his hand across the table. He took mine without hesitation this time. Then I'll tell you for him, I said. You've become someone worth coming home to. His thumb brushed over my knuckles. You didn't have to come back. I know, I said, but I wanted to. Silence settled again, but it felt warm, like a quilt wrapped around two people who had finally stopped, running from their own stories. That night, we didn't talk about what we were or weren't. We didn't label what was slowly growing between us. We just sat on the couch in the library, reading different books under the same lamp, letting our knees touch and our silence speak more than words could. Before bed, I passed by the guest room where I'd once slept alone, and instead walked straight to his. He was already there, brushing his teeth, pausing only for a heartbeat when he saw me. I opened the drawer on the left side of the bed, placed my book there and said, "This side's mine now." He nodded. When we finally turned off the lights, I curled into the space beneath his arm, my cheek against his chest. His heartbeat was slow and steady, like someone finally learning how to rest. "Evelyn," he whispered into the dark. "Thank you." For what? For believing I could be more than my name? I smiled. You already are. We didn't become a love story overnight. There was no grand gesture, no kiss in the rain, just the slow accumulation of presence, of choosing to stay when it would have been easier to leave. But sometimes, even that kind of love can surprise you with how quietly it breaks you open. It happened on a Tuesday. The day began like most had, in the 3 weeks since I returned from Florence. We shared tea in the kitchen. Nathaniel worked from his office downstairs while I wrote at the small desk by the window in the library, occasionally sketching new textile patterns or rereading the letter from his father. There was peace in our days, steadiness. But that evening I heard the crash. A sound sharp enough to silence the house. A sound that didn't belong. I found him in the study. His chair was overturned, and shards of glass glittered across the hardwood floor. A photo frame lay broken. A picture of Nathaniel and his father, taken years ago. Both of them in gray suits, standing stiffly in front of the old Blackwell headquarters. Neither smiling. He didn't look at me when I entered. "I'm sorry," he muttered, crouching to gather the glass. "Don't," I said softly, kneeling beside him. "Don't pretend it doesn't hurt." He froze. Then, to my surprise, he sat, back on his heels and let the pieces fall from his hands. "I got a call today," he said, "from a former partner of my father's. He said I'm dismantling the legacy my father built, said I've gone soft." I stayed quiet. I tried to explain, he went on, voice shaking slightly. Tried to tell him that legacy means nothing if you're alone in the middle of it. His hands were trembling, but I couldn't get the words out. I could never get the words out with him. I was always the air, never the sun. I reached for him, my fingers wrapping gently around his wrist. "You're not your father, Nathaniel." "No," he said. But I spent half my life trying to prove I could be. The room felt smaller, the air heavier. "I don't want that anymore," he whispered. "What do you want?" He looked at me then, truly looked, like all the walls had finally dropped, leaving nothing but the man beneath. "You," he said. "I want this house to smell like orange peel and cinnamon. I want books on the couch and teacups in the sink. I want your laugh echoing down the hall." I blinked, surprised by the tears in my own eyes. "I want to wake up with your hand in mine and know I didn't buy that moment, I earned it." I took a slow breath. Then I said the thing that had lived in my chest for weeks, waiting. "I love you." It wasn't a grand confession. It didn't need to be. Just 4 words, steady and sure. He closed his eyes. When he opened them, they were glassy. "I've loved you," he said quietly, "since the morning you added orange peel to my tea and didn't ask for anything in return." I smiled, and then I cried, quietly, the way people do when they're not breaking but healing. We didn't move for a while. Later, I helped him pick up the glass. We threw away the broken frame but saved the photo, not to honor the past, but to understand it, to remember what it cost to get here. That night, he didn't ask me to stay in his bed. I went willingly. He wrapped his arms around me like a man who still couldn't quite believe someone was there. And I rested my head on his chest, listening to the steady rhythm of a heart finally letting go of everything it was never meant to hold. "You know what scares me?" he whispered into my hair. I shook my head. "That I'm happy," he said. "And I don't know how to be happy without fearing I'll lose it." I pulled back just enough to look at him. "Then let's stop fearing," I said. "Let's build something that lasts, even if it begins with scars." He kissed my forehead. Slow, reverent. "Stay," he whispered. "I'm not going anywhere." The next morning, I woke up to the smell of toast burning. I walked into the kitchen to find Nathaniel standing over a pan, holding a piece of charcoal. "That used to be bread." He looked sheepish. "I was trying to surprise you." "You did," I said, laughing. He grinned. "Still worth it?" We had breakfast at the table with mismatched plates, laughing over burnt edges and undercooked eggs, the kind of morning that doesn't seem remarkable, except that it was ours. Afterward, he handed me a small box. Inside was a key. "To what?" I asked. He gestured toward the room at the end of the hall, the one that had always been locked. "I've been renovating it," he said. "I thought maybe you could use it as a studio." I looked at him stunned. "I want you to have something. In this house that's yours," he said, "not because I gave it, because you made it yours." My fingers closed around the key, and something inside me clicked into place. 1 year later, the house smells different. It's subtle. You wouldn't notice if you hadn't lived here through all the versions it used to be. But now it smells like lived-in wood, orange peel, and faint traces of lavender from the linen closet. It smells like something warm, something loved. Nathaniel's study has books with dog-eared pages now. His couch has a throw blanket I knitted over winter. The tea cabinet in the east kitchen is full. Chamomile, clove, cinnamon, peppermint, and a dusty tin of blackcurrant I can't stand but he insists on keeping, and the once-locked room at the end of the hall. It's mine. Light pours through the arched window, golden and generous. Fabric bolts lean against the wall. Sketches hang from strings, fluttering slightly when the heater hums to life. I've never had a space like this, never claimed a corner. of the world as entirely mine until now. Some afternoons, I sit on the window seat and write. Letters to my mother, mostly. She passed peacefully 5 months ago, surrounded by soft music, warm tea, and my hand in hers. The last thing she said to me was, "You're safe now." She was right. Today, I sit down with a cup of tea and pull out my favorite notebook, leather-bound, pages slightly warped from use. Inside is a letter I wrote to myself the night I returned from Florence. I never finished it, so I do that now. Dear Evelyn, you didn't know how strong you were. You thought survival meant being small, quiet, acceptable. But look where you are now, still quiet, but not small. You've made a life, not a perfect one, but a real one. You were traded once, but love doesn't barter. It gives. And you gave him a way back to himself. You found your way home. Don't forget what that feels like. Love. I set the notebook down just as the front door opens. Nathaniel enters with his usual rhythm. 2 steps, pause, keys in the bowl by the entry. I hear his shoes hit the mat. Then footsteps. He finds me in the studio, exactly where he always expects me. You look like someone writing something dangerous, he says, grinning. Only to myself. He holds up a paper bag. I brought the good bread, the one with the rosemary crust you pretend not to like but always finish half of. I take it from him and shake my head. I have no secrets in this house anymore, do I? Only the sweet ones, he says, and kisses the top of my head. We sit on the window seat together. His arm slides around my waist like it's meant to be there. I lean into him because that's who we are now. People who reach, not retreat. Never thought we'd make it here, I say softly. Neither did I. But I'm glad we did. Me too. He pulls something from his pocket then. An envelope. Not sealed, just folded. I found this in the attic last week. I think it's for you. I take it carefully. The handwriting is unfamiliar, a little shaky. Inside is a short note. To the woman who softened my son's heart. Thank you. You don't owe the past anything. But if you ever choose to build something new, something better, know that this house can hold it. Let it. With quiet hope, T.B. Thomas Blackwell. I press the letter to my chest. Not because I need it, but because it feels like closure handed down like a blessing. I think he'd like who you are now, I tell Nathaniel. Nathaniel nods. I think he'd like you more. We sit in silence for a while, watching clouds roll past the orchard, the trees now bare but waiting. Always waiting for spring. Just like we did. Later we prepare dinner together. Nothing fancy. Roasted vegetables, lemon chicken. A pie I've burned twice but keep trying anyway. We eat at the kitchen table with mismatched plates and second helpings. We laugh when Nathaniel drops the serving spoon. We play old records while we wash the dishes. Afterward, we settle in the library. 2 books, 1 blanket, a fire humming behind the grate. He looks at me and says, "This still doesn't feel real, sometimes." I know. I whisper. Me too. But it is. This love isn't loud. It's not cinematic. It doesn't throw furniture or shout under storms. It stays. That's what makes it real. As the fire crackles low, I rest my head on his shoulder and say, "I never told you what my mother said when I was little." He turns to me. She said, "Real love doesn't arrive like lightning. It comes like the way morning light touches your face. Quiet, steady. So slow you don't realize it's there until everything's warm." He brushes my hair back gently. Then we must be warm. And we are. In this house. In this moment. In this life we chose. Even if it began in shadows. We found our light. Together. Thank you for spending time with today's story. If it touched your heart, made you reflect, or simply reminded you of something familiar and true, please consider liking this video and subscribing to the channel. There are many more quiet, meaningful journeys waiting for you. Stories of love, family, and the moments that stay with us long after the words end. See you in the next one.